A lot of people think about approaching self-exploration through things like journaling or tarot cards, and I, of course, use those tools and practices as well. I have lots of videos on that. But today I wanted to show you another approach that I like to use using small objects and charms. And these are particularly very small objects. They're all about the same size. But I also like using small objects in various other ways, which I'm not going to go too much into in this video. I'm going to keep this mostly on using for, just for consistency, I'll refer to these all as charms. All right, so what I'm going to do, so this is kind of like my big collection of charms, or small objects, charms. And so just to very simply demonstrate one way to work with something like this is I'm going to randomly, I'm not really like looking. Of course, it's hard to look. This kind of goes a little bit deep. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly choose 3 items from this big collection, okay? And then I'll walk you through how I like to, or a very entry level way of thinking about working with these. So I'm going to pull them first, and then I'll show you. Okay. All right. I'm going to pause the video, and then I'll show you what. All right. So this is what I pulled, and whenever I'm working with small objects, I like to put them in a contained space. In this case, I'm literally using a quartz crystal to put them on, right? So the first object that I pulled was this little bead. And then actually the second one I pulled was candy corn. And then I pulled this flower, okay? So looking at these 3 objects, and this is something that I really like doing in group work, because particularly when folks are all working with like the same object or the same image, it's really interesting to see people's different perspectives or different takes on them. But just, using these 3 objects, reflecting on it for your own self, and just noticing, which one, if you're going to choose one of these, which one feels the most like you in this moment, and identifying which one that is. Which one represents a challenge? And then which object represents a resource or an ally? So you're basically labeling each one as feeling the most like you, a challenge, and then a resource or ally. And then if you want to, you can maybe like journal or free write, or kind of, write in little bits of fragments for a few minutes. If this was in a group, I might give some more directive prompts. Right, but this is just kind of a very basic way of using these small objects. And then particularly because it is so small, if you have your resource or ally, you could even possibly keep it with you throughout the day as like a touchstone, or what I think of as a metaphorical object that you could like return to throughout the day. So this is a fairly short video. I just want to really point out something that I think is really important about this type of a process. When I'm working in this way with like charms, small objects, tarot cards, imagery, really anything, it's not about trying to discover like what the correct meaning is of the charm or the small object, right? The charm, it's not that this charm is like hiding some kind of an answer or like a correct meaning that we're supposed to like decode in some way, right? The meaning is emerging for us in the moment through our relationship to whatever that object is in that moment, right? And that relationship could change over time. I also have these like little word beads as well. So people, if like, again, this is what I was saying about in a group, is someone else might choose a different charm to represent of those 3 that represents their challenge or their resource or their ally or themselves, right? They would have seen something entirely different from that set of 3. And it's super interesting when that dialogue comes up in a group setting, right? So the object itself doesn't matter so much, right? What really matters is that conversation that evolves between you and that object, that relationship that you have. And there's lots of ways to work with small charms and objects and things. So that was just like a very, very basic illustration of that, right? So thinking about like, why this charm? Why now? What does it like elicit or bring forward or bring to mind right away? Like, what does it remind me of, right? Like, we had candy corn. What memories are evoked by candy corn? Or even just maybe one of the colors on the candy corn, or the triangular shape, right? What part of you does it seem to respond to or resonate with, right? And for me, that's where the super interesting material like lives, right? Not in interpretation, but in the relationship that I have in that moment, right? And so particularly when we're using objects specifically, they really become a doorway, right? And what matters is what happens when we step through that doorway, when we kind of explore what's coming up or what's coming to mind, or what's on the surface, right? So whether I'm working with things like tarot cards or oracle decks or Dixit or charms, stories, or writing prompts, I'm really interested in like the same thing, right? It's that same underlying process. Or even role-playing games, right? How these symbolic objects, these metaphorical situations, like in role-playing games, help us encounter ourselves indirectly, right? So sometimes it's a lot easier to discover something through this process of discovery and curiosity, rather than through like a direct question, right? A symbol gives us something to play with, to push against, to imagine with, and really to respond to in a way that we're not necessarily used to doing, right? And so often that is where those unexpected insights start to emerge. So if you're interested in this kind of a process, definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel. And then I'm also running a free group where we go through these different types of writing prompts together live on Zoom. The information to join that is in the video description, so be sure to check that out.